Hi everybody, we're at Cutchins in Northampton, Massachusetts, and we are a group of occupational therapists who get together to support one another. Most of us are in the caring together continuum role, and we're gonna talk a bit about what that means and what OT looks like in that role. So we'll start by going around the table and all introducing ourselves. Start this way.
My name's Alexis. I'm an occupational therapist at Gandara Center and 2 residential programs. I've been there for 4 months.
Great. I'm Amanda Rodriguez. I'm the occupational therapist at Luck. I've been there for just over a year, and prior to that I was also at Gandara in the 2 res programs. Currently I work in the continuum and in a residential capacity.
I'm Charlie Cooley. I'm an occupational therapist, a residential occupational therapist that works here at Cutchins.
And I am Sarah Harford, and I actually am the one person that's not in that role, but I do work as an occupational therapist in a community setting. So I'm with ServiceNet's Enrichment Center, which is a day program for adults with acquired brain injury. All right, so let's answer some questions. So we know everybody's name and their role in their agency and what length of time. Can you guys say a little bit about what's happening in terms of OT in your programs, what your role looks like in the program that you're working in?
Yeah, absolutely. So my position is pretty unique in that I do res and continuum. So in the residential capacity, I'm there part-time. So 20 hours I invest in the group homes doing individual treatment, assessments, providing some staff support, also attending treatment meetings, the staff meetings. So doing the real one-on-one intervention. It's a little bit more intense than my role in the continuum, which is viewed as a consultant. So sort of defining what consultant is can be a little challenging. As an occupational therapist, of course, we understand that we do our best when we're a part of the process. So if we actually see the environment that the children are living in, that the families are living in, we can actually observe them doing some of their occupations. So it's less of a consultant in, you just come to me, but more of I actually go out to the families and try to meet with them and do some screening type of stuff, and then provide any support that I can to the outreach workers or the clinicians. So it's definitely dramatically different. One is very intense, hands-on in the group home, and the other one is a little bit more detached, but still involved in the actual environment.
And so as a residential OT, I work with the kids, the age range between 8 and 19 at this point. And I'm working a lot with both with staff and with directly with the clients and the families. My role has been to certainly work on the life skills of each of the children in trauma-informed care. There are some significant barriers in that, especially in things like distress tolerance. So I'm trying to empower each of the children with the tools to address that and to be able to do the stuff that they really want to do. So that's what I do.
Thank you.
My role is very similar to Amanda and Charlie's, except I split my time. I have 20 hours in each residential program. So in half the week I'm in one program, and the other half I'm in another program. I run a group in each program and see youth individually for treatment, as well as assessments. Our programs have sensory rooms, so that is another piece, is implementing sensory programming. And what's also unique is when you're in the continuum, I know Amanda said she has family involvement. I'm beginning to be involved with families who are involved in the process. So that's something that I'm working on.
It's a great point to bring up, the fact of connecting the work that's being done in the res to family. I sometimes have likened it to sort of being on an island when you're in the group home, of like you're treating in this one bubble, and it's really important to reach out and connect to those families, because that's ultimately where the kids are going.
Yeah, it's been very helpful. being able to also educate families on what my role is as an OT, because they know what an OT does in a school setting, but not necessarily in a residential setting.
That's a great point, actually, is defining, what is it like to try to define your role in the setting that you're in, especially in more of a community-based, sort of broader perspective role than what most people think of OT as being. I have definitely found that to be a challenge where I am, and it's coming around, but it's taken some time.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I have found challenging where I am is getting across to people what the role of OT is in a community setting, as opposed to what most people think of as OT, which is in more of a rehab-based setting. And I'm just curious if you guys might want to talk a little bit about how you've been able to define your roles where you are, and how you've been able to communicate that to families and maybe also to colleagues that you're working with who may not be as familiar with OT in a community setting.
So I've been finding it difficult to explain to families because they often see it as, well, OT is for those that have a disability, and my child doesn't have a disability, so why are you working with my child? So I explain it in more of an approach of, we might sit and talk sometimes, but we do a lot of hands-on activities that are related to their goals. So that might be working on emotional regulation strategies or independent living skills. And once I word it that way, parents and others that I work with start to get an idea of, okay, this is what OT is. Especially after a treatment session, I might show staff or share it with the family of, hey, this is what we did. And once they see what we've done, they get the picture more. So I find that helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Nicely said.
I also think with the role of OT when it comes to families, it's sometimes the families, the good thing is that a lot of our sensory techniques are starting to get a lot more attention. And I'm noticing that families are noticing how these sensory related techniques are really influencing their children. And so sometimes I'll get a parent coming in and they're excited. They're like, oh, OT is awesome. Please give us more. Because, with what we do, with sensory modulation, with a child feeling more comfortable in their own skin, it really helps that child be able to do more of those things, those daily life activities that they have to do at home. So as the parents and as the staff see more of how this is influencing their child and how this child seems more comfortable in their own skin and more able to do these activities, that's where I see that bridge. So when it comes to staff, I work a lot with the staff. And again, huge thing is the stress tolerance with trauma-informed care. They're noticing that these tools that OTs come up with from the evaluation standpoint, we're picking up on triggers, we're picking up on things that really help them. And so I infuse myself a lot in a lot of these activities at the residence with the staff, because I feel as though with my input with that, they're more able to recognize the powerful influence a lot of these skills that we can offer to the children. So those are some of the ways in which I really try to infuse OT in the residential setting. And the other thing I do is here at Cutchins, I'm more responsible for the activities that go on in general. So I'll make like an activity schedule for the staff to use with the hope that these children are doing more things, getting off grounds, doing fun activities, that it can be very organizing to their nervous systems as well. So between that and infusing those sensory techniques and making sure the staff are recognizing these triggers, it really helps to bring more of an understanding of our role and appreciation for how OT has such a powerful influence in the mental health arena.
Thank you.
And definitely everything that's been said here. I've also feel like there's a small piece of that cognitive side that we get to take on as well. So sometimes staff may see a child and see them as a 16-year-old and have these expectations of what a 16-year-old can do. And with our knowledge and understanding of development and how trauma can affect development, we understand that there's a whole variety of factors that may be influencing their ability to engage. So taking a look at the environment and sort of how they're cued and looking at what we call, of course, grading activities and tasks and providing them that education of them being sort of staff saying, this isn't a kid who's just being obstinate, who doesn't want to shower, who doesn't want to do these things, but just might need a little bit more support, and modeling and showing them this is how you can set up a sort of the environment so that they can be successful. And that little switch sometimes can be very powerful, because now you have staff who sometimes feel like they can't help a kid to suddenly like, okay, I can give them these tools so that they can actually be successful in their day. So a lot of what you mentioned in terms of providing the sort of sensory strategies and helping them being regulated, and also if I'm not there, here's what you can do as staff to support the kids.
Yeah, that's well said. Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, another great, you bring up a point that one of the things that we do is called PIA, which is life skills, and a way that I was able, and OT was able to influence in the residential setting, the use of PIA for these kids to get more life skills. I was able to look at the worksheets and I realized like the font was small.
Yeah.
It was recognizing where the child was at and making it so that it was usable for them. So like you're saying, the developmental, where they're at developmentally and what they're able to do functionally, OT can come in and they look at it from that point of view where we're thinking, okay, let's give this child the right challenge. Once you're able to do that, I have a great participation with PIA. Before, when I came in, PIA was almost like a trigger for the kids because they knew they were going to get a challenge that was way too much for them.
Yeah.
So that is going to cause them to become dysregulated, and so focusing on that is hugely helpful. And so PIA's been great now, and the kids are the attendance is great, and they're doing the worksheets, and it's huge.
Wow, yeah. So that's interesting. It sounds like each of you has talked a little bit about almost like a tiered approach that you take in your roles, so that you're focusing not just on the individual level, but also kind of program-wide in terms of education with staff, education with families, individual work with students, and then also group work with students. Do you guys want to talk a little bit more about that, like a little more detail about what those different levels look like?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because this comes up a lot. And I currently have a level 2 student that I'm supervising, and this was something that I sort of mentioned on day one, is that as much as we're doing a lot of one-on-one intervention, we're also providing a lot of staff support and sort of interventions at an administrative level.
Yeah.
So key to that is definitely having someone on the leadership who believes in OT. So where I am currently, I'm very fortunate to have someone who's totally in love with what OT can bring and what they can offer. So sometimes what that looks like is having regular supervisions with that individual to say, here's what we have for protocols and practices. As an OT, these sort of changes might be more beneficial and sort of trickle down that way. So the way that I see it is I might have the best intervention for a youth that's totally evidence-based, that they're really in love with. But if the staff don't have the education and the tools and the support to continue that intervention after I leave, then that intervention is kind of lost in some way. So it's really important to make sure that the staff are aware of what OT is, that they have the support, that I'm doing the same sort of OT analysis in some ways of how to best engage staff as a group, and making sure that that line of communication is open, and then it's not sort of someone overbearing coming down and saying this is what we need to be doing, but more like, I'm on your team and I want to make your job as easy as possible so that you can support these kids and have great relationships with them here's what OT is suggesting in that way. So having, I know that you had mentioned like activities, planning out that sort of stuff, thinking about, you know, what are the kids doing when they get home? Is there an outdoor activity that we could be doing? So I may not be working with all of those youth, but I'm helping the staff to make sure that these sort of interventions can get carried out. And that's, I think, really critical in this.
That's also something that I've been working on is involving staff in my groups so they can then learn more about what OT is, but then also learn from me by role modeling appropriate ways for them to redirect and how to help the youth be successful in group, which has been helpful having staff there. So that's something that I've been working on.
Yeah, and it's so important from the management perspective to have that support and have the staff encouraged to participate in these different activities. And oftentimes the staff is that will either make it or break it in a group. If staff is involved, the kids want to be involved. If staff is not involved, the kids don't want anything to do with it because they think, oh, staff doesn't care about it. Why do I care about it? So it's like that influence is huge. So getting that piece is critical for OT to be effective.
I think too, that idea of, you know, staff it's a tough job to have as a staff person to be on the front lines. And so to come in and sort of take away a little bit of that frustration in some way and empower them. Of course, for the kids is definitely beneficial, but also just for staff as human beings to understand, we understand you're doing your best. Here's how we're going to support you and make this a little bit easier. And I found that when you sort of put that little bit out there, there's like a definite change in affect, and there's a different sort of dynamic within the house just by doing that little bit. And then you have these staff people who will come to your groups and really participate and that you can role model and you can show them all these different interventions. And then you as an OT can work on some of the other tougher stuff. So if they're doing sort of these baseline sort of sensory related sort of activities, then you can really get into that nitty gritty with some of the kids that you're working with.
I have found that too to be really key, is to have that staff. When I first started where I was, there felt to be like a real division between like floor staff, we call them floor staff where I am, and clinical staff, that like clinicians were doing this over here with people, and then the staff is just kind of managing the day-to-day operations. And so one of the things that I've really tried to do since being there is to bridge that so that we can pull staff into our groups as well. Also for modeling, you know, and to give them support, because like you said, it is a really, it's a tough job. It's a tough job for them, so
I think one of the things that's been really helpful is coming from an approach where it's encouraging staff to be more like detectives, because we can come in as OTs and we can offer suggestions from a technical standpoint, but the more we make it so that these are activities, so like let's say we're working with a kid and we're really focused on sensory modulation, and we have a sensory seeker and they seek vestibular, and it's encouraging the staff, not only saying, hey, you know try this activity with them, which can be really helpful as a skill for them, but then also having them think outside the box about activities that they might have that could help in in the child being able to get those types of sensory input. So that's been really great, and working from a strengths-based approach with staff. So if the staff is really good with crafts, get that staff to do more crafts with the kids. If the staff can play guitar. I mean, one of my favorite moments was walking out and seeing one of our staff with a guitar playing on a kid's like with a hula hoop to the music. And he's like, check out this skill, Charlie. And it's like, and it's getting more of that. And I think that really helps with the buy-in too.
Yeah, that's really good points. So can you each say a little bit about what you feel has been, so you've been in your role least amount of time, only 4 months. So you might not have as much to say about this, although I'm sure that you've done a lot. But maybe identify one thing in particular that you feel has been really successful and something that you've done since you've been in the role. It doesn't have to just be one thing. If you have 5, you can talk about 5.
I can think of one.
Yeah.
Engaging staff and
Yeah.
involving staff, and I think being new to that agency and because they've had other OTs has helped. Like, I'm here to work with you, and it's not a me against you. Like you were talking about clinicians versus floor staff.
Yeah.
So I think that has worked well.
Yeah.
Communicating with staff, communicating with other clinicians.
Yeah.
I think that piece of communication.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, that's worked well.
Yeah. Awesome. That's a big accomplishment,
Positive.
actually. Yeah, for sure. That's good.
In the continuum role, when I first started, there was a lot of uncertainty about what OT was. How do we use this OT? There was some sort of residual, this is what the previous OT did. And so that was a little tough space to navigate initially. And what I can say is definitely successful since then is the buy-in from the clinicians and the outreach workers in the continuum it's so strong when it comes to OT. And they'll come back from an intake that maybe I wasn't there for, and they'll say, Amanda, you've got to see this kid. These are some things that I'm noticing, and I'm like, okay, you totally get what OT can do. And the feedback I've heard from them is that really providing the rationale to support what OT is doing and what OT is looking at was something that was really missing before. So now that they have, kind of thinking back to what you were saying about staff having these tools in some way, now that the staff are detectives and they see, oh gosh, I'm noticing that thing that Amanda talked about with this other kid, maybe this kid's a good candidate for OT. Having that is really powerful. And it's great also to pump up the staff and to say, you're totally right, you picked up on something that could absolutely use some OT. And again, going right back to, now I can give you that sort of consultant strategies where you can go out and use these with the family. That's been, I think, really, really successful and has made the continuum position a lot easier to go out and meet these families because I know sort of what I should be already expecting because the staff have bought in and they understand it so well.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a relief.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the thing, when I see the family, the child, the staff, the element of hope increase because things are getting better. Kids are feeling more comfortable. Kids are better able to do the things that they really want to do, and volition is so incredibly important. It's really what they want to do, and when I focus on that hope increases. So seeing the hopefulness increase, gives me the most enjoyment with what I do, because it's a beautiful sight when you see it. You're seeing a kid happy, doing things they want to do. It's that engagement and activity that really I see a lot of that. So I really focus on that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
This is really a powerful experience. I think about sometimes, what some of the youth we work with, what they've been through, and maybe the opportunities they haven't had or felt like they couldn't have or weren't worth having. And when you sit with them and you give them not only the opportunity but this feeling like they are capable of it, it's definitely like a step back moment of, wow, this is really significant for this child, and I'm often so very thankful that I get to be a part of just that one moment for them, to let them sort of invite me in and I get to share that.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So wonder if you could say a little bit about how you see your role as being different than, say, like a mental health clinician in terms of how when you do your initial screening or assessment, the things that you're looking for, that detective work that you do that might be a little bit different than what the sort of background or training of a mental health clinician would be, because I know sometimes that can be a little bit blurry in the roles that we all have in a community-based setting that's more sort of mental health driven.
Absolutely. I think OT has this great way of not just looking at the individual and their history, but a wealth of other factors that are involved in that. So of course we have the neurological piece and developmentally and what trauma means and all the sensory-based interventions related to that. But also thinking, of course, right back to function and functional engagement. So when I'm working with a kid, I'm certainly looking to make sure that they're secure and that they feel stable and that they feel functional so that they can engage in some of these things. And sometimes I think for some people it might look a lot like mental health work, strictly like clinical work, but I think just the way that the OT is looking at all of the circumstances that are coming together and carrying them all at the same time to really think about what's meaningful for this individual, what is in mid-step of an activity, what sort of factors are at hand that may be limiting or allowing this person to engage in this sort of activity, and more through doing than through just sort of talking it out. But at the same time, that talking it out does have a certain amount of value. But I think it's more proactive with consideration of a lot of variables that certainly impact how an individual can function.
Yeah, thanks.
I feel as though with the clinicians, with OT, here at Cutchins, we very much complement each other, and so we discuss things, we discuss issues, we tackle it together, and there's a huge appreciation that goes on there. A great example of also working with clinicians. I'll do a group with a clinician, and what's nice is that we've kind of steered a little bit away from, oftentimes the kids don't like the idea that it's so clinical. They don't necessarily like the idea of doing a DBT group. And when I kind of joined the clinician and rethinking how we're approaching the kids with this type of group, we became way more engaged in activities where they're able to gain things from a DBT perspective, and it's been really helpful. I mean, before, a lot of the kids here, they want to feel typical, they want to feel normal, and when they feel as though things are so clinical, that can be a trigger for them. So as I've entered in with clinicians doing like a DBT group, we go out and we do things. We go out and we go to town. They experience mindfulness, and that's one way I feel as though OT and the clinicians were able to merge and really get the best from the experience for the kids.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah.
I've had the same experience. I've really started recently to do more co-facilitation and a lot more sort of bridging again the gap between the different types of clinicians that are in the program, and doing a lot more collaboration.
Yeah.
And I think when that happens, it's beautiful. It just really supports the participants in the program so much more. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I have not had the opportunity to collaborate for groups with clinicians, but now that you're saying that in the future, I can.
It took me a while to get there. Yeah, especially when you get into a program and that hasn't been the model previously. It just takes some time, but I think you sort of make an inroad with maybe one clinician who gets it, and then it starts to sort of fan out.
There's a family I'm currently working with in the continuum, and the trio of us is some like kind of a riot in some ways, in a great way. So it's the clinician and the outreach worker. We are all on the same sort of wavelength in terms of how we approach the kid, and the treatment is just, I feel, so much richer because you have 3 people with 1 kid, and we're all sort of tackling this kid from these different perspectives to get to this treatment goal. And when I think about when we go back to the office and we're writing our notes, it's really interesting because what I see as the OT is sometimes not what the clinician is writing about from her
Right.
perspective,
Right.
and what the outreach worker is documenting from her perspective. And to me, that is just so neat to know that you can have 3 people working towards the same goal,
Mhm.
but all tackling it from these different perspectives.
Right, right. Yeah, that is fascinating.
Yeah.
You're all, even, in the same group. You had the same, seemingly, you had the same experience for the past hour, but the things that you noticed were very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is really interesting. Yeah. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about what kind of support you're provided in your roles in terms of supervision or guidance about how you approach OT in the roles that you have, both in residential and in the continuum, if you have both roles?
So I am able to meet with the OT director, who's one of my supervisors weekly, for that OT feedback that I feel like sometimes I need that I may not get in the residential programs. But I also work with 2 program directors who are really starting to get what OT is, and they'll ask me questions, but then I'll also give them my ideas, and so that's kind of where our supervision is starting to head towards.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
My residential supervisor is a superstar. She is absolutely into trauma-informed care. We use ARC as sort of our evidence-based practice. She believes in OT and has very high expectations for what OT can offer, and we have absolutely formed a team between the 2 of us to sort of tackle the best practice for what we can do in the group home. Having that is huge because I can go to supervision and be vulnerable and say, gosh, I'm not sure how I'm feeling about these things, and she will meet me right there and say, Amanda, you're doing great, or you're right, let's see how we can work on this together. But it's always with this sort of OT mindset that she has, even though she's not an OT. And similar to that, in the group home, our, I think he would be a program manager, is what he's called, just loves OT, loves what OT offers, is totally on board with any of the crazy ideas that I have. Just last week, I was like, hey, we want to do a mural, is that okay? And he's like, which wall do you want to paint? So no asking questions about, well, I don't know, is it going to be this or that, but was total faith in what OT can offer and what it would mean for the house. In the continuum, there's still some uncertainty about what OT looks like, but I think because we have so many strong cases with OT that's been involved, is definitely sort of turning that around a little bit, and the value of OT is being recognized. So that feels like an up and coming, a positive story on its way.
Nice.
And my direct supervisor is an OT, and she's also the executive director of Cutchins. Her name is Tina Champagne. She's done some incredible things for OT, and she is trying to infuse OT any way she can, and that's been huge for getting those skills out there to these kids from an OT perspective. So the support has been enormous where I am, and I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So it sounds like you all have some pretty strong leadership actually and good support. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
Which is huge. Yeah, I'm fortunate to have a director where I am too who since day one has basically said, it's your program, I trust you.
That's
Can
great.
feel a little intimidating,
Yeah.
but it's yeah, fantastic to have that kind of support, and she's pretty much said yes to all my crazy ideas too, so it's good. It's really good. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you feel there are some opportunities for growth where you are right now in either program, residential or continuum?
I'd say increasing the staff training and also for clinicians about what OT is. That's probably where I would start for growth.
Yeah.
I echo that as well. The staff are provided a 1 week sort of once they get hired orientation that goes over everything related to the agency. But in terms of like annual reviews or some variety of competencies, I feel like that's lacking a little bit. So it'd be great to have OT involved in the trauma-informed care training, and can it be something that's done yearly or every 6 months? similarly, what is OT training? I don't mind doing it as we go, as I'm doing interventions with kids, but it'd be great to put the staff in one room together and spend some time together, and they could see what OT looks like, what OT with Amanda looks like, and how it's actually benefiting the kids, and what they can do to support the youth as well.
Very, and my thought is exactly the same. It's providing the training to the staff. Fortunately, this next Wednesday, we are doing a training, like a Sensory 101 training. It's going to be a 3-day phenomenon.
Wow.
Where all the staff go to it, and the hope is that I'm going to have them both experience different things that OT is able to offer intervention-wise, and have them offer it to each other in the hopes it builds buy-in, it offers more techniques that they can use, and I'm excited about it. So, yeah, exactly my same sentiments on that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I find that to be the case too. And one of the challenges where I am is that sometimes there can be high staff turnover, and so I might implement a training and then find that a few months down the road, only half of the staff that I trained is still there, and so that can be a challenge for sure. But I do feel like if you can sort of find the few staff people who are there for the long haul and are kind of leaders, even if they're not in an official leadership role. They're typically, tend to be leaders who emerge among the staff, that if you sort of pull them in, that they can sort of become unofficial trainers among the staff as well, So yeah, that's a big piece of it for sure. So let's end then on this last question, which is what is your favorite thing about the role that you're in right now?
Being able to engage with youth, and you might not see the change right away, slowly, and I think that's something that I look forward to. So that would be mine.
Something kind of similar. I really like those moments when a kid has refused OT. They start to engage in OT, and then I walk into the house, and they're the kid who's like wants to come up and give me a hug all of a sudden. And I think that speaks to, of course, the power of the OT interventions, but also that therapeutic use of self, and a kid who feels like they have someone when maybe they haven't felt that way, and to be vulnerable and to reach out to someone literally and to be on the receiving end of that's probably my favorite part of what I get to do.
Yeah, and similarly, that seeing a kid excited to see you, and just Charlie, and and having a kid go up to you and seeing them use skills and saying, Charlie, let me get a hand hug. Can I get a hand hug? And which is like a joint, or like giving like deep pressure and making them oftentimes a calming strategy. I love that. It reminds us like, this is I'm in the right place. Yeah, exactly.
Those moments where you remember, this is why I went back to school to become an OT. This is why I know I'm in the right field. This is why I love what I'm doing. Yeah, I have that experience too with one of my favorite things is having tried to engage someone who's just not really interested in engaging for months, that person that sits in the corner where I am, we have sort of a foyer where we call them the grumpy old men, actually, who sort of sit in the corner and they don't really want to engage in any of the activities, and that's fine. We don't push, but we ask. We ask everything, and then on that one day, for no reason that you can necessarily identify that's specific to that day, but that it has to do with that last 6 months of interaction. The person stands up and says to you, what are you doing today? Can I be part of your group? That's like,
makes everything worth it.
That's
what a great
feeling. Yeah. And now they're in 3 groups. So that makes it all worthwhile. All right. Well, I think we can wrap up then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.